to something that's always bothered me with the Crash Bandicoot series is how primarily for the first three adventures you were Crash. Yeah, there were some Coco stages, but it was a mount level with Purah, and then her spaceship levels, and so there was no like on foot. And then in the Wrath of Cortex, you got her doing like her little kung fu kicks and stuff. And then it just boiled down to her being a reskin of Crash. Crunch has never had platforming. The only time you've ever been able to play as Crunch is in vehicle or in Atmosphere in the Crash 2 and Trance. Imagine that. In the Crash Bandicoot franchise, Allura has had a platform playable game before Crunch. But yeah,
False.
so like in the Crash
False.
Bandicoot series, we haven't had alternate.
Incorrect. False.
False?
False.
Go.
You get to play as Crunch on foot for about 5 seconds in Mind Over Mutant.
When? When you get zapped with the ice?
No, in his boss fight.
Go on.
In Mind Over Mutant, when you fight Crunch, you jack him and you play as him for a minute. On foot. He's on foot and you can jump. It's platforming.
Oh. Well, okay, fine. You got me there. But that's just splitting hairs. He's not a playable character, is what I'm getting at. And the only, like, where are we now in the series? Crash Bandicoot 4 has alternate Tawna and Dingodile. And Dingodile is a recurring character who we've had since the third entry. And alternate Tawna, yes. Alternate Tawna, I don't like her that much as a character, but it's a welcome. I welcome her to the series because, like I said, it's nice to have other hero characters. Just think, at the beginning of the series in Crash...
4 of them now?
Go on.
Like, what? There's like fucking 4 of them now?
Right, which isn't amazing, but...
We got 4 good guys.
And I guess Catbat counts because his intro comic showed that he doesn't like Cortex.
There.
So he might be an anti-hero.
No. Catbat is there. They, them.
Correct. They, them.
Catbat is neutral at best because they kind of... they don't like Cortex, but they don't... I mean, they're not like hanging out with Krim. You know what I'm saying? They're like, I don't like Cortex because he's a piece of shit. All I give a fuck about is these burgers.
Fair.
You know.
Well, that's why I said anti-hero.
Yeah, I don't, but they're also kind of anti-villainy. Right?
Rumble doesn't really have a story yet, so all we're basing this off is just the intro comic.
Yeah, well, I mean, you say yet. Kind of feel like story-wise, we're about as. I mean, we're not going to really. I don't think that's going to happen at this point.
Well, I just meant more issues of the comic coming.
Well,
they might expand the lore a little more.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so like just off the top of my head, Crash, Coco, Crunch, Tawna, Alt Tawna. I mean, because Tawna's kind of in the Catbat bucket. Because like original Tawna, she's not like helping ever. You know, she's off doing her thing.
Yeah, now she's the head of the Nitro Squad.
Yeah, not really doing any heroic crap. So I mean, Aku counts, but like he doesn't. I mean, you don't. If even if you're not talking about playable characters and you're just talking about like people who are good, Like, I mean, you can start to kind of move the boundaries a little bit. You can kind of edge around. You can kind of sneak Pasadena in there if you like really want to be anal about it. But like, she works for Von Clutch, and Von Clutch is like not a villain, but he's like a villain fanboy. So like, he's not great. I mean, and I mean, tag team racing. You spend the whole game hearing about all of his fucking horrific labor violations. So like, he's not good.
Yeah,
And
but
then you,
on the other hand, she's like in love with Crash. So at
yeah,
the
but
very least, she's an ally. Like we
yeah,
know
but
she's not a villain.
well, yeah, but she's also not a hero.
And
And
then
then
we got
the,
Hasty and
that's
Yaya.
Yaya is a hero.
Hasty's got Aku Aku, bruh. He's got to be.
Yeah, but I'm just saying. For me, there's a line where they cross over from being like, it's like watching a fucking like shonen where like it's characters of the week. Like, yeah, Yaya and Hasty and Pasadena are like allies to Crash, but they're not like heroes.
Right.
They're not like part of the core.
Which is the
I mean,
problem is that I'm getting at.
I would argue that alternate Tana is not part of the core either, because she's just, I mean, like, they have confirmed, as we've discussed, that 4 is an in between game. It's like in the middle of the timeline as far as like the Crash greater narrative. So if you're putting all of the shit into one bucket, she eventually goes back to her universe because she has to, because the fucking quantum masks have made it very clear that like, gotta stop fucking with this shit. Fucking put it back where it goes. So like, the Rumble and like the Skylanders convergence ceremony stuff, like, stuff touches every once in a while. Like, the Spyro universe bleeds in a little bit. The fucking Tawniverse kind of like rubs up against the side, but like, she's kind of transient too if you think about it. Like, she's not gonna be, she doesn't stick around. So like,
Right.
really, it really is just Crash, Coco, and Crunch, and even Crunch is like, sometimes he's off doing his own thing.
Off lifting weights or being stuck in ice cubes.
Yeah, so like, really, you got Crash, Aku, and Coco.
And Coco,
Uh,
as I said, is now
like,
just a reskin of Crash.
well, see, that's the thing that you want to talk about, like, stuff that bothers me, or stuff that,
Uh huh.
but you want to talk about stuff that like irritates me, or that I'm gonna fucking rant about. Well, there's one, like, the just, to me, the Crash Coco reskin thing is totally fucking fine, because to me, you could have always argued the other way around. Like, all of the shit that she did in Warped and Wrath of Cortex, up all the way through Mind Over Mutant. Mind Over Mutant was the first one where she was like not that, but she was locked to player 2. But all the way up through those, you could argue all the shit she does, Crash could have been doing. Like, he
Lore
doesn't really.
wise, no, but yeah, gameplay wise, of course.
Well, the you tell what's the lore reason that he couldn't have, because he doesn't know how to make a spaceship or whatever. He could
No,
drive
like
it.
you, I was just being pedantic. You were
Well,
saying that he
but
can do everything she can do, and I'm saying, well, he couldn't have made the VR hub, but that's not what you were talking about.
no, what I'm talking about from a gameplay standpoint, like, he could have ridden the tiger. He could have done like the Coco levels in Wrath of Cortex. She does different moves than him, but like, he could have gotten through those places too. He can ride the scooter. He can snowboard. But so like, to me, it always was kind of like, oh, they should have their own unique stuff, and I'm like, well, yeah, I,
Sorry.
yeah, but
Yo. So
the
it was the same out It's the same outcome. She would have done a kick, but the spin and the kick are the same thing.
Yeah, the point is they're not actually unique in those games. So to me, it's like it's a visual swap either way to me. So like I like the choice element because first of all, like there's a lot of the time where people bitch about Coco in Crash 4 because she talks more than fuck it. She's like, but here's my thing with that is she plays the Aku role in that. Like nobody bitched when it was a dude that was fucking talking for Crash and being quote unquote the main character in his game and yada yada yada. So to me, like I they're a fucking brother and sister and they go on adventures together and you can play as either one, but like they're both doing it. Like to me, like when I played through Crash 4, for instance, I always play through as Crash first and then Coco second. If I even play as her. Because that's kind of the other side of the coin is that people are always like, oh, it kind of feels like she's overthrowing him or whatever. And I'm like, not really. Like to me, it's just like that's a choice you make if you're the one that fucking puts her over. But to me, it's just like a gameplay. It's like it's like it kind of is like a skin, right?
Right.
Like the story stuff. Like she just Crash doesn't speak, so if speaking needs to happen, somebody is going to do it. It's either going to be her, it's going to be Aku or Crunch or whoever. So to me, it never bothered me. Uh, there was one funny thing that happened a while back. People were like telling me that like Coco doesn't like Crash in Crash 4. She's always mean to him and all this. And, like I actually was like, I don't think so. And I like went and I looked through the entire cutscene collection of Crash 4 because this was during the time before Summit Sphere took off, so I had a lot of time, and it was still COVID, and so there was no employment. So I had a lot of free time. So I looked through all the cutscenes. I literally added up every frame of animation and the line of dialogue in the game where Coco expresses any kind of displeasure or sarcasm towards Crash. Out of the 28 minutes of cutscenes, and I'm off the top of my head, it's a little bit less than half hour somewhere.
Yeah.
But out of the half hour of cutscenes in the game, Coco rolls her eyes at Crash once, and she other than that, the amount of time she's not either smiling or laughing with him, not at him, is 1.3 seconds. So it's less than 1% of the game. So and I wrote this up and I sent it to the people who were saying it to me because they were saying it in a Discord server I was in at the time, and I was like, objectively you are incorrect. You are objectively incorrect. And I was like, I don't know what this means about you or about me or anybody else, but that is not true.
Arguably, her very first appearance would have been her rudest to Crash, where she's ordering him to go get a battery for her laptop.
That's the other thing. The very first time she shows up in the series, she's like, "Ugh, quit being a lazy piece of shit and get off your ass and do something for me for once."
Right.
The first thing you ever see Coco do in the Crash Bandicoot series is go, "Hey, fuck you."
Go. Hey, get off your butt and go get me a battery now.
In Crash 2, she's kind of an asshole the whole way through. So literally the whole thing to me seems to stem from people not wanting the male character to share spotlight with a female character. Because when she's on the sidelines, people have no problem with her being a huge bitch. But now she's off the sideline and not being a bitch at all, and people are calling her a bitch. So yeah, it's kind of a little, I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I'm just saying introspect a little bit. Let's all think about why do we get bothered by Coco? And it kind of, you know what I'm saying? But as far, to go back to the original broad point that I was trying to make, as far as gameplay wise, like I kind of like I don't. And this even applies to Rumble a little bit. Like you can kind of like give her like, oh, she's got gizmos and shit to like kind of make her different than Crash, and like,
Oh,
oh, she
you could
uses
have make her like this is borrowing from other series, but you could have made her like Ratchet. You could have given her hacking abilities because I know there's some hacking mini games in Ratchet.
yeah. So like I'm kind of just like
But then again,
you
in
can.
Crash
She's so
Bandicoot 4, they have the flashback tapes, and she pretty much went through the same training as Crash. So
yeah. So like if you
she has all the physical abilities of Crash, plus she gets her smarts from Engine.
yeah. So to me, it's like it's kind of whatever, and like it's just a fun little feature that they include. And I think
Yeah, because
going
like in Crash
forward,
on the
you'll
Run, there's
probably
Crash and Coco, and they played exactly the same. And now Crash
and I feel like
4,
going forward, that's probably going to be the standard. And I think you'll probably, with how much people like complain about the narrative stuff, you'll probably see. I mean, if they fucking do another one,
right?
you'll fucking probably see. Like they'll probably make an effort to like, so people don't bitch, to be like, oh, don't make sure Crash isn't standing 3 inches further back than Coco is in this shot. Like I don't know, dude. Like I just played that whole game and never at any point did I go, oh, this is Coco's game. I just was kind of like, and maybe I'm just naive, but like the whole game, I'm just thinking, all right, all the Crash characters doing Crash character stuff, and it's an adventure through time and space. And, oh god, look, it's fucking MILF Tropy. Ah, Oxide's here. I didn't think he was in this. Ah, it's just I don't know. It just kind of it becomes reflective to me. But as far as gameplay, I don't like Coco. I just don't think there's stuff that makes her as ripe for a fundamental difference than if you were playing as, say, Crunch. Like I think Crunch, you obviously would not play exactly the same, and even if he did, it would feel different because of like the visual being different, of him being so much bigger.
Right.
It's like when you play as Dingo Dial, you can still jump and bounce on crates and stuff, but because he's so fucking big and slow, it feels different.
Yeah.
Like even if he didn't have the fucking different moves, and it just looks different too, and the visual does more to change how it feels than people realize. And then just, I mean, so that's that.
Yeah, that's all that. That was a big tangent, but to put a cap on that, so Crash and Coco play the same, and then Crunch has only had one appearance where you can control him, which you said you move and jump, and
And
then
you can shoot.
see that would be great. Make his hand turn into the Mega Man Buster. That would be a fun run and gun.
He should just be.
And then
He
get
should
up
just be
close to someone and punch him in the face with his metal hand.
He should just be Gamma from Sonic Adventure.
Gamma, E102.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be cool. See, now you're getting into adventure, and that's what kind of spurred this whole thought because you and I had a discussion about a potential game that we'd want, but I don't know if you want to keep it to your chest or not.
Uh,
Well, in the game that we were discussing, yeah, so it would
I might have
be
even still be a
Crash would be
baby.
running, and there'd be a little warp orb hovering above him, and Crash would do his platforming stuff, and then you'd come up to say a giant block that Crash can't get past. So you'd press a button to trigger an event, and Crash would get sucked into the warp orb, and Crunch would come out of the warp orb, and then Crunch would smash the block and progress further into the level, and then you could continue playing as Crunch if you want, but he would be slower than Crash, and he wouldn't be able to jump as high or stuff. And then you'd come up to like a door that Crunch couldn't get past, so you'd swap out, and Coco would do like a hacking mini game to unlock it, stuff like that. So you'd be able to swap out the characters. You recall that?
Yeah, just kind of Sonic Heroes, but for Crash Bandicoot.
Yeah. And it's just thinking about stuff like that and how Crash's roster of characters is just so one-sided. You have so many villains and so few heroes that I was just like, it really stinks, and I wish that they would add more characters. But then you get the people that don't want that and say that that's bad and straying away from it. So I wanted your opinion on that. It took us so long to get to this one question. Would you like it if the Crash Bandicoot series added more heroes to counteract the overwhelmingly larger side with all of its villains?
Yes and no. Like, on the yes end, like, I despise the originalism, like the absolutist originalist view that people have of the Crash series, that you can't do anything that was not in the Naughty Dog games. Like, there are going to be new characters, because if there aren't, like it bothers me that people are like, oh no, everybody's got to show up every time. Why don't we use the characters we've already got? Well, I'm like, okay, that's why Mario and Sonic and every other fucking mega franchise of all time fucking all did that, right? They never ever did any new characters. There were never any fucking new story. Like, I don't like the like, because you got to think, Crash 1, you got fucking Crash, Aku Aku, Barely, Cortex, Brio, Papu Papu, Pinstripe, Ripperoo,
Koala
Kong,
and then Lab Assistants and Tawna.
And that's it. That's the amount of characters is on two hands.
Yeah.
So like, Crash 2, Engine shows up. Now,
and the Komodo Bros and Tiny.
And the Komodo. So like, you, at one point, these cocksuckers were new too. Like,
oh no, Tiny was supposed to be there from the start.
Yeah, and so were the Komodo brothers. You would know that if you were a real fan. They were in the unused. They were in the.
They were in the cutscene.
No.
The Bible, Tiny was a woman. Don't you forget it.
See, no. They wouldn't, like, the people who get really, really, really like bitchy about it and like authoritative are the people who are always like slightly wrong. So they wouldn't even be like, oh, it was from the cartoon intro. They'd be like, it was from the unaired pilot for TV. Like, because they got their info in July of 2015 and then never checked again.
Yeah. Where they thought it was a cartoon pilot, even though clearly the second half of it was the ending of the game.
Yeah, so like, but the point being, in Crash 3, the actual, like, it takes 3 games for the main villain of the series to show up. Like, the actual catalyst of everything that happens in the series, Uka Uka, isn't even in the first 2. So like, when people like,
oh, so you're saying like, oh well, Uka Uka shouldn't even be in all these games because he wasn't in the first one.
Yeah, so I'm like, where do we draw the line, right? Because people are like, I don't know why people are like, oh, Naughty Dog, naturally, that's where you draw the line. I'm like, all right.
And then you got people that thinking Bash is Naughty Dog.
It's like, to me, it just, So the answer to the actual question, when I said, do I want to add more heroes? Yeah, and I said yes and no. To me, yes, because like it's like I said about Yaya and Pasadena and company earlier. They're like the fucking like ally of the week or whatever.
Right.
Because one thing I think would benefit Crash as a series is if it was allowed to be episodic. Like it has the through line where like everything happened and like we can remember that stuff happened in other games, but by and large, like the games just keep going, right? There's not so much focus on like you fix the you focus on continuity by not focusing on it and not fucking like letting the games be allowed to be like a cartoon to some degree and having characters that show up and sometimes they show up once and that's it and then you have other characters who come back because like it's like when
This is kind of a
like
tangent, but I didn't like that they actually added time frames into things like this happened 1 year late. Like for Crash 1 to Crash 2, a time jump, yeah, that's acceptable. But then in Crash 4, how they gave the times, so now instead of thinking, "Oh,
what
look, these adventures happen and these adventures happen," it's like this adventure happened at this exact time, and then this one happened in this year, and this one happened in this year. I don't
well
really
see but
like that,
that's
unless
the
you're
thing.
saying you do like that.
Well, I here's the reason I like it in Crash 4 because it makes it indisputable that it's
You'd
not
think you'd
a
think it would be
that
indisputable, but go
it
on.
makes yeah, you would think it would be fucking indisputable. It makes it indisputable that the fucking game is not set in 20 fucking 20
Of course
because
it
Crash and
is.
Coco have not aged. Like and like I don't know about you, but like there are people who are like, "Ah, well they Entropy and Dr. Cortex grew back up in the netherworld between time and space. So clearly it's 20 years later." I'm like, no, it's not. Because that means that Crash Bandicoot and Coco are like 33 and 28. And I don't think you guys are ready for that fucking conversation. Because it's just not, right? But the one I don't really like is when they're like, oh, Twin Sanity is 3 years after Wrath of Cortex, and they were frozen for 3 years. I'm like, but there were games in between there. So like, yes, but now that means Twin Sanity has to come before these other games that came out before it, because otherwise you're literally like at that point back then they weren't like they did not think, oh, this shit's spinoffs. Like the only time I've ever seen any of the developers go, you know what, this is a spinoff, is Tag Team Racing and Crash Team Rumble. And ironically enough, neither of those games really do much to fuck with anything. And there's no reason they can't be, like, narratively canon. But, like,
That I would argue with, but only because of the comics. The comics of Crash
well,
Team Rumble
the
have completely jumbled anything that.
no, no, they haven't.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
just,
yeah. Have you
no,
read them all?
I've read them all.
Yeah.
Like you're arguing stuff like, oh, Cortex doesn't know Ripto or whatever, and I'm like, I think that's you reading into dialogue more than it's them coming out and saying it. But the point of the whole that conversation is, I don't like when they fucking do shit that like that because like that would imply aging of the characters, and they don't show that. So like it's like, oh, Crash, I was frozen for 3 years, and now I'm back to fuck with you again, and
Well,
the
yeah,
only one of
Cortex wouldn't age because he was frozen.
no. I'm talking about the rest of the characters
I know,
around
I'm
him
just joking.
that don't fucking age, other than Coco, who they what I mean is that Cortex has been gone for 3 years and like nothing has changed at all. So like other than I mean outside of Coco and Nina who kind of get like a little bit of an age up in Twinsanity and Tag Team into Titans, nobody else ever changes. And like anytime there's ever like a time skip that they for whatever reason tie to the real life time skip between games, it's never used for anything, which is why I do like the one in Crash 4, because the one in Crash 4 where they're like, this happened in 1996, this happened in 1997. It's literally there just to anchor shit together. It's not there to be like, it serves a purpose. Like Cortex being frozen for specifically 3 years in Twinsanity doesn't serve any purpose other than to say, hey, this is after Twinsanity. So it's like,
You mean Wrath of Cortex?
yeah, after Wrath of Cortex. But the problem is that means that you then have to take the Game Boy games and Nitro Kart and move them somewhere else as far as chronology, because Twinsanity pretty explicitly tells you that Cortex has been stuck in an ice cube for 3 years.
Exactly.
So like if it's
But I was more so
you
talking
can
about like saying pinpointing actual 1996 instead of being like this happened right after Crash Bandicoot 1 or this happened right before Crash Bandicoot 2. Them saying 1996. But
well, I
then
mean, you
when we
have to
have
because
the flashback tapes show actual dates, so it kind of sets it in stone in universe. I just
well,
liked how it was floating
that's what I mean is
ambiguously.
well, in that case, you kind of have to, because what are you gonna do? Just make up a year?
Eh,
Like
like Mega
it has to
Man
be set in
20XX or
it.
19XX.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be set in a year.
Yeah.
Like, and the Crash series has always been sci-fi and voodoo. So like it's not like it needs to be grounded. Like it's not like anything's going to be anachronistic where they're like, oh, Coco has a tablet. That doesn't make any sense. I'm like, Coco also has a fucking spaceship.
Yeah, she made the
Like, what's
VR
wrong?
hub. She does all sorts of tech stuff. I saw this one post on Reddit, dude. It made me facepalm so hard. They were like, "How does Coco have a smartphone if there's no satellites or cell phone towers?" I'm like, "Oh my god, bro." I was like,
I'm like, that's why
she's
I like
go ahead.
that's why I will always, especially now, whereas I may not have been this way in the past, but now I am the biggest proponent of just continuity should be sensible, but it should be broad. Because when you start getting into the pedantic details, people start picking and choosing when to be pedantic, and that's where the disagreements come from. Because people will be like, "Oh, the cell phone doesn't make sense." I'm like, "Okay, I guess now that they've said it was 1997, I guess none of it makes sense because we definitely did not have lasers that turn little fucking rodents into big people."
Oh my gosh. But see, my whole channel is built off lore and dissecting stuff. So I can't shit on them too much. But at the same
Well,
time,
you can't
there's
shit
some
on them too much,
stuff
but
there's
like you
stuff
can,
that
like
I can look past. Like
it's
when I
like,
make a
but
video about Crash's hammer space and I say, "Oh, well, Crash inherited his pants from Cortex. Cortex said that there was so much space and that they were breezy." And then I go, "Oh, there's so much space in those pants? Well, that explains the hammer space. And Crash could store his bazooka and infinite Wumpa fruits in there because his idle animations, he's always pulling out more Wumpa fruit. So he's got hammer space pants." So like I do tongue in cheek
okay.
stuff
Let me
like
put it
that.
this way. Let me put it this way. When people use it additively, like that, and it's not them being like, "This is how it definitely is," fine. But when people are like using it just because I don't like this specific thing, so I'm gonna make up a logical reason for why it has to be objectively false so that I can be right on the internet. Like, that's when it becomes a pain in the ass to me, because it's like they're like, oh, it's got to be set in present day because of this, and I'm like, it very much does not have to be set in present day, because like I said 15 minutes ago, that means Crash is 40, and I'm like, he's
Yeah,
clearly
man.
not.
Yeah.
Like, like, like Crash to me has like that. We were talking about the age thing. Like Crash to me has always been an adult, because look at his fucking girlfriend. But
Yeah.
I mean, so like at the start, he's already a full grown ass adult Bandicoot, and then people are trying to tell me 3 years later, in 1998, he throws Cortex into a fucking vortex into the void, and then 25, like not 25, but like 23 years later, they fucking come back out of the void, and now Crash is a fucking 42-year-old man saving the world with his fucking 36-year-old sister and the fucking 800 million-year-old voodoo mask or whatever. And I'm like, folks, I don't think it adds up that way.
So you don't think that Cortex and Tropy grew to their ages again, and then when they broke out through a time rift and went back in time? You just
No,
think
here's the
that
problem. Here's the problem. No, what I'm talking about is in the game,
I'm listening.
the world when the first world, the first 2-3 levels where you're like post warped before they come back, it says present day on the map. So people are like, see, they retconned everything because the first world in the game is set in
Oh, I
present
see what you're
day.
saying. So
And
they
I'm like,
think
that doesn't
present.
make any fucking sense for
I
it to mean
understand
that.
now. Present day
It
meaning
it means
1996 or not? No,
it,
1998
it
rather.
it means at the current time, and the game takes place between warped and everything else. It means that it was present for them.
I didn't know people were arguing that present day is what makes them think that it happened in
That's one of the
20, what
100
was it,
things, and that's
2020?
yeah, that's one of the 100 reasons that people think that. And to
I
be fair,
never knew that. That's asinine. That's
right?
complete
It's
idiocy.
because
Because it even
the
says a
game,
few days ago or some crap with Dingo Dial.
there's so much, and like I get it, because they spent 6 months of marketing, like going, oh, is it a retcon? Oh, it might be alternate universes. Ooh, and I'm like, but it's not. And you fucking like, I think the point was, oh, we're creating intrigue. You don't know what's gonna happen, even though ooh. And I'm like, all that did is just make people think that you fucked with it, and you didn't actually fuck with it. Like,
Dude, I'm like flabbergasted right now just thinking about it. Like it never occurred to me that them saying present day would make people think that it was our
like
present
our
day
present day,
because
yeah.
Coco's clearly not like
A child?
yeah yeah
She's clearly still a child.
yeah like what? Yeah,
But
that's
all
dumb.
that all that aside, like I get why like you might not want them to put like a specific year, but like when you think about all the sci-fi shit, it really doesn't matter, because the world of the game is so weird anyways, that like if they never ever say, like, you can do the math, right? Like you can be like, oh, Twinsanity takes place in 2003, and this takes, and like this what Mind Over Mutant is a year after Titans, so it must be in like 2006, because like some games don't have time skips, some of them are still close together.
Right.
like oh no.
Like from 2 to 3, how long was the space station floating around up there?
Yeah,
It
and
never specifically said a year.
yeah, and like, so like it actually, if you think about how little time skips there are, it actually does kind of make sense that like Coco and Nina kind of go from like being like tweens to being teens. they're the only ones who age at all. So it's still kind of weird in a vacuum, but like there is some progression and there is some like time scaling, but like it like them saying, "Oh, the first two games are 1996 and 1997." And then ostensibly the other one is 1998 and then 4 is 1998. Like ostensibly that doesn't change anything, right? Like it doesn't we know it, but it doesn't mean like if a new Crash game comes out, nobody should assume like, oh, it's set in 2024.
Right.
It's just set after the last one, right?
Right.
Like that's what I want is like when they go forward, like they're just like, oh no, it's after, in this case, On the Run, right? It's like after On the Run, which was after Mind Over Mutant, which was after Titans, which was after Tag Team Racing, which was after Twinsanity, which was after blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah,
And you
blah,
have to
blah.
kind of put the Game Boy games somewhere in between Twinsanity and whatever. And people are always, and we talked about this last time, but people are always like, oh, but Crunch isn't in it. He was busy. Like
He was lifting weights somewhere.
he was doing some shit. Like Tawna shows up off
Oh,
and
dude,
on.
I've
like
said that. I've said that so many times on Reddit. People are like, oh, well, it can't fit because this. I said, you realize Tawna didn't appear in a Crash game for 10 years. She was in Crash 1, and then she didn't reappear until Boom Bang?
Yeah.
She had a cameo appearance in Twinsanity, but she didn't show back up until Boom Bang. So you're telling me that Boom Bang takes place directly after Crash 1 because that's when Tawna showed up again?
It's like people are like, it's the other side of the coin where people are like, oh, we got to have all the characters. Like, you use all the characters we've already got. I'm like that's one of the benefits of having a shitload of characters is that sometimes you can use different ones and they don't have to all be like. That's kind of what I mean by like I'm not as anal about it anymore. I don't really care what Pinstripe was doing during fucking Crash of the Titans. He wasn't involved in the plot.
He was doing mafia stuff.
You can tell me like in an unlockable, like if there was like an encyclopedia that was like, oh, this is what everybody was doing during these times. Like that's fun side content, but like the fact that it's not explained in the game doesn't mean that there's a plot hole, right?
Yeah.
Like it just means those characters were not involved in the fucking conflict, which is fine.
Because not every character has to be in every conflict.
Exactly. So that's how you can be like, oh, the Game Boy games are after Twinsanity because they kind of have to be. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. But like, you can, and that's only because they made the fucking comment that oh, this stuff nothing happened during this time because they were frozen. Like if they hadn't said that and it just started, you wouldn't have to do that. But so like that's why I hope none of the games get kind of fart sniffy about themselves going forward, where they're like, no, we're the main ones, so we get to put things on ice and like pause the timeline, and these games are spin-offs. And like, don't do that. Just Sonic it. Everything's canon. Just fucking if chronological release order, unless otherwise stated. Because it makes it easier, and then you can still do all the fucking cool shit. Like we've discussed this ad nauseum, including last time. But like my view is just Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? It's linear, and the order it came out in is pretty much the order that it matters, unless they want to do a fucking flashback episode. And if they do that, they tell you, and usually it connects back up to something that happened later, anyways, and it makes it worth doing. So like. That's what Crash 4 is it's a flashback episode that fucking connects some stuff up. And like when you really think about stuff like the Oxide shit, it's like his whole little mini arc is that he's a fucking shitty mechanic working at a shitty thing, and he's like he knows Tropy, and Tropy's fucking having him do this for him and do that for him, and he's like hitching a ride with Oxide, and like there's little hints that Oxide wants to be a racer, but he's not yet. And like it's setting up the shit to come, and it's connective, and there's like little Easter eggs like the Scorporilla plans in the castle and the picture of Crunch on the fucking diagram in the flashback tapes when Cortex is still working on the Bandicoot General shit, and like it's way cooler. if it's all connected than it is if it's like, oh well,
all
these Crash games,
segmented and
yeah,
well
this
these
Crash
ones
game is
happen
only
in this
canon to this.
universe and this one happened in this universe
Yeah,
and
and Crash Boom Bang is canon, but only to Crash Tag Team Racing, which is only canon to Twinsanity, and this one's only canon to this one. And I'm just like, just fuck off. But the whole point was like, there's only been a little bit of time scaling, right? Like they've been like, I think if you add up all the time skips, it's like 6 years or something like that. There's like one from Crash 1 to Crash 2, not really from Crash 2 to Crash 3. They never really said it. So that's 1 year up to like they kind of implied that Crash 3 and 4 are in 1998 in 4. So let's say that's 2 years. Then Wrath of Cortex to Twinsanity, that's another 3. So like, and then 1 from Titans to Mind Over Mutant is confirmed.
so it's like between 5 and 6.
It's between 5 and 6 years. So like that's actually perfect because the only characters who have visibly aged from tweens to teens. So like it makes pretty all right sense.
Yes, agreed.
And then like it's so like, but yeah, I don't need them to ever mention time again. Like I don't need them to be like, oh, this game is after fucking Mind Over Mutant, so it has to be at least 2003. Like I don't care about that. Like just
The
like
only time that we actually need time is like when they're like they launch themselves into the future, like in the Rustland.
yeah, like if they fucking mention like, oh, if they go to the future and it's like, oh, this is 2176.
Yeah,
fine,
but
right?
as long as it's
Like
playing in the present day, it doesn't matter. We don't need times.
yeah, but like so you can have your cake and eat it too. Like yeah, time has passed, but like largely it's a sliding time scale. It's just that not a sliding time scale. It's just ambiguous, right? Like
I mean,
other than the fact that there
if
have
you want to
been,
say that the cell phone is a cell phone, then it's a sliding timeline.
but you cannot, but you don't have to be, and it's like it makes.
Did
more
she ever
sense.
use the cell phone as a cell phone, to be honest, or did she just take pictures?
She took like there is an idle animation in N.Sane Trilogy where she'll take it out and like kind of be on the phone and like be talking, and then it blows up in her hand and burns her ears.
I do remember that, but like,
but here's my fucking thing. That is a stupid fucking thing to complain about when in the same game, when it actually came out in 1997 and not in fucking 2017, she talks to Crash on a goddamn hologram.
yeah, that's true. They got the little floating camera hologram.
And they've got video calls in
And
that. And you know what I
you
didn't
also
have
got to
in my house in
remember,
1997?
they teleport. They got giant
like,
space lasers to blow up space stations.
And see, that's what I meant earlier when I said being a pedant about details is fine if you're going to use them additively. Like, oh, Cortex mentions the pants have a lot of space. What if that means hyperspace? Like that's fine and interesting, right? It's adding, it's not taking anything away, and it's not being like, oh, this isn't canon. Like for one thing, like that's the other thing that when people are like, let me finish my first point, and then I'll go into that, and then we'll fucking wrap up. But my first point is like, it's when people are like, oh, this can't be 1997 or 1998. It has to be present day because she's got a tablet. That's stupid. That's dumb. Like, and we've explained why that's dumb.
Because there's so many fantastical devices that they have in the Crash Bandicoot series. There's the Psychotron to teleport to different universes.
Yeah.
The Volvo Ray, which was introduced in the very first game.
Yeah. But here's the thing. So, like, that's one reason that the art style shit does not bother me. Because there are some people who are out there like, you know what? This doesn't retcon the series out. This actually creates a new timeline from a new Crash 1 in the N.Sane Trilogy. This is the N.Sane Trilogy timeline because Crash gets these pants from Cortex, but they're different pants than in N.Sane Trilogy. So this must be a different timeline. I'm like, Or and it's just because it's a different team making a different game. It's not like the art style changing does not change the events. It's like I know like people are like that's why
Hey.
I
Talk about the design change. You always word it so eloquently. Don't throw in so many F bombs, but explain to our listeners why the Radical Games Crash is still the same Crash, despite, oh my god, he looks different and he's not wearing gloves. He's got tattoos.
because they goddamn tell you he is. A
Go
lot.
on, go on, go
Like,
on. Talk about how art doesn't matter, story
hey,
does.
fucking Uka Uka getting up in his fucking face, but hey, Crash, remember that? It's the Evolvo Ray, and fucking Embryo being like, I was in the first game. Well, if this is an alternate timeline and it's a reboot, no, the fuck he wasn't, but he is, and he was, and fucking the Voodoo Bunnies being like, hey, remember when Uka Uka already tried this shitty plan in Twinsanity and it sucked? Like it's the same.
Oh,
Like
I understand I understand that, but I just wanted you to go more in detail on why
like
art
for one
doesn't
thing, the art
matter.
style's not for one thing, the art style's not the same from Crash 1 to Crash 2. The texture rendering is pretty different, and like the character designs are different, and it's different. Like so already we're fucked already. Crash 1 in its own universe, separate timeline, because the art changed.
Oh yeah, this one I always like. Crash Bandicoot 3, they all got 5 fingers. New universe.
New universe. Boom. Like they literally I wish it had made its way to the actual game. Like the thing about Tiny being the first Mojo experiment, and that's why he looks like a regular tiger now, is because he's actually a fucking Tasmanian tiger and regular tiger hybrid now. Like, which should be in retrospect is kind of obvious because tiger legs don't look like that.
Yeah.
But like, but like, it's clear. Like, I wish they had gotten to explain it in game, and they kind of in the on the run like supplemental shit. They kind of try to hint at it, but
He's
like,
no longer his wise self. He's returned to
yeah,
his primal beast
yeah,
form or something along the lines of that.
because clearly Mojo mutations are it's magic related, right? So it's you can stick it in some science machines, but I don't think it works quite the same way. So like maybe he fucking came unglued. Like it goes away after a certain amount of time. Like maybe you need to keep funneling the mojo in or whatever. But like that's the only like drastic thing, right? Like people always talk about Aku and Uka, and I'm like, yes, they look drastically different, but the events are chronologically referred to. They look different because they were trying to put a different visual spin. Tiny looks different because he's the same character who's been remutated again.
Right.
But like Crash, Coco, Crunch looks. There you go, Mind of a Mutant, new universe because Crunch looks different than he did in Titans.
Crunch looks
Like,
different in every game he appears in.
it's they're not like that has nothing to do with continuity. Like, oh, Engine has a robot arm in 4. Well, he didn't in 3. New universe.
Oh
It's not the
no, it's
same time.
because he blew up in the end of 3, so he had to be reconstructed.
My brother in Christ, that man blows up 400 times a game. Like, literally, his entire origin is oops, blew myself up. Like,
Yeah, and I've said it too. I said, man, there's so many fantastical things that happen in this series. The thought of him getting a new organic hand is not
which,
breaking any continuity for me.
and like, it's clearly just a design choice. Like, people would have an argument with me if at the beginning of Crash 4, Cortex was like, "Oh, what happened to your hand?" He was like, "I fucking blew it up, I guess. I blew it up specifically about 6 months ago when they were fighting in space with Crash's sister in the fucking dick ship that looks like a penis." I'm very deliberately not doing a real engine voice.
I know,
It's
because
much
your
more
engine
effective.
voice is pretty good. You were
Oh my!
doing, I don't know what the hell you were doing.
Hey, it's more closer to pinstripe than it is to engines. Like,
Oh my god.
hey, you guy, I fucking blew up my head. Coco shot at me with her fucking penis ship. And then the tiger came in and he shot at me too. What the fuck?
Oh my god.
But like, if they had done that, sure, whatever. It's a fucking plot hole. But like, they didn't because they didn't think that. Like in the art book, there's like a drawing of like Cortex from modern day when he goes back to the past, and he's old in the hologram and then they were like, don't do that because it would have been fucking goofy. Like, it's just there's so many art style means nothing to me to continuity. Like it only means continuity changes if the fucking characters like say it.
Yeah, like they
Like
reference it.
if they're like, "Hey, I got a new arm," or whatever, or like the fact, but like Crash himself, like Twinsanity, which is always held up as the continuity king, the fan service king. Crash looks pretty fucking different in that game than he's looked in the other games, and nobody had a fucking problem with it. Fucking Koala Kong looks disgusting in that game, and nobody fucking mentions him looking different. Like,
Arguably, everyone looks different in Twinsanity.
Exactly, and nobody complains about it. It's just like literally it all
like
boils down to, I
Ripperoo
don't
looks
like
wildly different. His eyes are different. His ears are different.
Yeah, but you never hear anybody saying, "Oh, well, between between Crash One and between Crash Bash and Crash Twinsanity, Koala Kong went off and got a lot of plastic surgery and did a lot of steroids."
Dude, even from CTR to Bash, Dingo Dial looks completely different.
Dude, Dingo Dial be losing and gaining weight like a motherfucker.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
so from 3 to 4, he gets all fat, and then 4 to to Team Racing, he slims down, and then from Team Racing to Bash, he gets anorexic.
And then by Twinsanity, he grows 3 feet.
Yeah.
Like in Twinsanity, he's 9 foot tall for some reason.
It's
like,
just...
he's just like, and he's like 865 pounds. He's like the art style is just the art style. Like, it's just the way the game looks. It's not lore. It's not narrative.
This is perfect. I agree with everything we're saying here. This should have been the topic of a video instead of a tangent of a video.
Well, see, now, but it works out better that way because it makes me like, I say things that I give a shit about when I'm not like trying to fucking remember what the hell we were talking about before. But a train's going by. That's great.
That's okay. I only heard one toot toot.
Yeah, but so the point is, the art style does not fucking play into the story events at all.
And the people that say Twinsanity or the Radical games don't happen is because of the truncated, abridged intro, and then I honestly wish that wasn't included because it confused people so much.
As a kid, ironically, as a kid, I didn't even think of it as Crash at first. I thought it was just like a little fucking slideshow. It's like, oh, this is the story. They make big Titans, and the Titans kind of do this, immediately when you play the rest of the game, you're like, oh, that was just bullshit. Because the fucking Evolve Array that they use in the little shadow puppet thing is a fucking handgun.
Yeah. Well, that's why people say that it's different. They're like, oh, it's a handheld Evolve Array. And
you can't argue that because Engine explicitly says, in Uka Uka's lab is where we make the Titans. And then they go there and it's the goddamn Evolve Array from the fucking first game. On the ceiling, like, you see all the Titans in cages, and they've got all these fucking shit. Like, it's the fucking Evolve Array. Like, they didn't fuck with anything. And, like, that's another little thing. Like, I've heard to work on Uka Uka. I'm like, because he's organic. He's a piece of wood. What do you... Like, it's not... Like if you shot it at some metal, it'd probably bounce off, and like actually you kind of see that it bounces off of other shit. But like he's made of living stuff. But
Arguably.
like granted it's all souped up with mojo, but that's kind of the whole story of the game is that they've taken the evolve array and they've crammed it full of mojo. So like he's alive, he's got mojo, it makes perfect sense. He's gonna turn into a fucking big mojo dude.
Yeah.
Like now why the mutation specifically makes him humanoid and like 800 feet tall or whatever is up to the science, right? But like you would think that's the whole point, make them kind of humanoid, make them intelligent so that you can boss them around. Like that's the other continuity thing that I actually like a lot is that they're not reboots, but Titans and Mind Over Mutant are the plots of Crash 1 and Crash 2 kind of rehashed, but like this time he does them right. Like the whole plot of the first game is I'm going to make a mutant army and a Bandicoot's going to be my general. And in Titans, he's like, I'm just going to do the mutant army. Fuck the Bandicoot.
Yeah.
Like, and then in the second game, the whole plot is I've got the Cortex Vortex in space and I'm going to brainwash the planet. And then in Mind Over Mutant, he's like, I'm just going to fucking skip to the part where I brainwash the planet. And I'm not going to tell anybody I'm doing it until I've already done it. And
The
then,
envies.
like, yeah. And, like, it works. And, you know, it only doesn't work on Crash because he's, you know, the shitty mutant that doesn't work right.
Right.
Which they fucking build on in 4 by having his mutation not just be randomly fucked up for no reason. It's fucked up because he fucked it up.
Right. Because he went back
So, like,
in time and.
Like, I hate that people are like, oh, the Crash makes his own creation. Like, I don't think that's the thing. I think what happens there is that Crash is the reason his mutation fucked up.
So had
Like,
Crash not gone back in time, he would have been General Crash.
he that's what I think. I think that's the read you take away from that because it makes it funnier to me. Like, because it also makes Cortex's failures recursive. Like, Cortex is so much of a fuck up that like he fucks up his fuck up. Like he fucks up in the future in the past, and that makes his fuck up in the past fuck up in the future.
So it's all Cortex's fault.
Yeah, like people are like, oh, Crash fucks up his like they don't like it because Crash creates himself. No, he doesn't. Cortex still creates Crash. Cortex still fucks up Crash's mutation because it's Cortex's fault that he went back in the past and tried to fuck with it. And he did fuck with it the opposite way from how he wanted to.
Right.
Like but that's what I like about the Titans and Mind Over Mutant plots being rehashes of his old plans is that like it shows you he learns. He's like learning over these 8 mainline games, and like in my opinion, all of the games should be one story. But like even if you just have the 8 mainline games or whatever, like he learns, he gets like what does he do in Mind Over Mutant? He's like, you know what? Since Uka Uka showed up, every shit kind of sucks. So he got fucking rid of him. And in Titans, he's like, you know what? Maybe I don't need a general. Maybe I'll be the general. I'll just have 8 million guys. And like, maybe instead of fucking waiting until I've got this fucking thing charged up to fire it, maybe I'll just make little ones and send them to people and tell them it's a toy. And like, oh, look at this cool device. And maybe I'll just, like, he gets better at it. But he still sucks. But like he does learn over the series, like, you know, like, which is funny because like that's his character arc is that he like in the first 3 games he gets kind of defeated and like starts his arc towards being his natural flamboyant self and kind of depressed, and then in 4 he kind of comes to terms with that, right? He's like by the end of 4, yeah, he lost, but he gets put on the beach alone, and he thinks, "Oh, I'm done. I'm just gonna be me." And then he's fucking having a good time, and then Uka Uka comes and gets him.
And it's like, we're not done yet. And he's like, oh, hell.
But like over the next couple of games, like people always kind of lament that he's like not as serious, but like it's not that he's not serious in Wrath of Cortex and Crash Bash and all those, and he's like kind of goofy, but he's kind of like treating it like a job for a bit. But then in Mind Over Mutant, he's comfortable with himself, right? He's the flamboyant, like goofy Cortex, but he's like, oh, you know what? No, I am evil, and I do want to conquer the world. And this guy has fucking come along and made himself like my manager, and like I was doing fine without him. He was stuck in the fucking temple and like being, oh, we're gonna conquer the world. I'll give you the fucking like I'll tell you about the power crystals and shit. But like I don't need him. So like this relationship they have where like they keep having this little tug of war where Cortex is starting to get more like he's starting to be more confident again, but he's still himself. He's not just generic like I'm evil. He's like, yes, I'm evil, but I'm also kind of fruity. Like he's coming to terms with it, and like
with his little dolphin tattoo.
yeah, and that's present in the second game. So like I never really like even as a kid, I was like, I don't get why people are like, oh, he was so serious. Like, yeah, he put the seriousness on for Crash, but every time you see him alone with himself, he's like, oh, of course, the crystals. No. Like that's what I like actually is over the series he becomes more outwardly himself. He's not putting on for the rest of the world being like, "Oh, I'm a villain. I'm here to conquer you." He's like, "I'm going to conquer the world and I'm going to have a Bed Bath and Beyond on every corner and a Bath and Body Works in my house." Like, yes, I like skincare. Like he's like he can be both things. And I like that he's both things. But like just let me. I've got a segue.
Okay.
That but that's to go back to what we were saying earlier, there is a time scaling. Like there's a time passage, there's character arcs. And that's the thing. Like if you view Crash 4 as an interquel or a midquel or whatever the fuck you want to call an in-between sequel, yada yada, like and you look at like the character arcs, they set up a lot of that. Like Embryo being kind of fucking pathetic and like starting to get obsessed with the revenge. Makes a lot of sense for how he ends up being later. Tropy. Like people are like, why does Tropy go from being so serious in 3 to being kind of a fucking old posh goof into insanity and stuff? Well, because in 4 he falls in love with himself from another universe and then loses her and gets thoroughly fucking dunked on by Cortex. And he tries it, and then he tries again with Entranced and fucking gets dunked on again. So like you kind of look at all this stuff and it starts to like add up, and like Dingo Dial, like it sets up this kind of in out pull push where he's like, dude doesn't even know who he's working for. He's just kind of doing whatever he wants to do, and like sometimes there's treasure to go after, and then sometimes he makes his diner and he tries to retire, and his diner gets blown up. And then in Twinsanity, he's not really working for Cortex. Like he's like living on the fucking iceberg in like a hut, reading Shakespeare, doing fuck all. And the only reason that he fucking gets involved is when they land on the fucking his stupid little house and break it again. Like he can't have shit in this world. And they happen to mention, oh, treasure. He's like, oh, I guess I do have something to do today. Like they kind of set up these like things that happen later. And they can only like they already happen later in the other games. Like they
It helps
plant seeds
flesh
for it.
stuff out.
And like
And
I think in retrospect, 4 years on, Crash 4 as an interquel does a lot better job of it than people give it credit for. And if they had just said that out of the gate and not tried to be like, oh, it's retconning stuff, and had been like, oh, see how Warped connects to the rest of the series, like people would be viewing it through that lens, and it would be more obvious to them because all the pieces are there. Like they clear at minimum, you cannot argue that they did not take Dingo Dial and Brio and Tropy character traits later games. Like that's clear as day. Like whether they're trying to set up those events, you can kind of waffle on, but like the character arcs, clearly they were trying to connect because they use those characterizations, they use those details. So like to wrap up, like you were talking the time scaling. Like to me, it all it works together. And the only like they kind of had to put a year on the stuff because they're showing you like this happened in the past, and like they kind of have to like you're not gonna watch a fucking VHS tape and like have the time code pop up in the corner of the video and say 2 years ago.
Right.
It's gonna show you when it was recorded. Like, and because of the fantastical nature of the series and the sci-fi and the voodoo, it doesn't matter what year it is. So like, Coco can fucking have a cell phone that looks like the cell phones we have today, even though canonically, fucking Mind Over Mutant would only be 2002, 2003, or somewhere around there, or because they've got all this science shit. Like it doesn't matter.
They
Like
literally go to the future multiple
yeah, so
times.
yeah, so like it. That again, the point that I made earlier. When people are pedantic to ruin shit and like disqualify shit, it's goofy to me because you can equally re-pedantic your way into explaining it again. Where it's like they have holograms, why wouldn't they have cell phones?
Right.
We didn't have
It's
we
not
didn't have
our
all
universe, it's the Crash universe. Who says they can't
exactly
have cell phones?
exactly. And then the character design stuff, it doesn't play into the story. It's just the way the game looks. Like no, almost none of them share the same art style. Even Crash of the Titans and Crash Mind Over Mutant don't really share the same art style.
Yeah,
Like the environment,
he gets a little taller and
the
thinner.
environment, the environment art is pretty similar, but it's also a much brighter colored game. Like there's a lot more texture detail, even though it's still painterly. Like Titans is very, very, very like painterly. Like the textures look like painted. In Mind Over Mutant, it does evolve from that. It's still like painted, but it's not like you don't see brush strokes in the fucking textures and stuff like you do in Titans. It's an evolution of the same thing, but it's all like I said, much brighter. It's much crisper details, and that's not just because it was also on well, no, it actually was on the same consoles, so it's not even a generation leap. But like, it doesn't play into the story, then it doesn't play into the story, and I don't. It doesn't matter. But and then yeah, so like that. I don't remember what we started this fucking podcast with today.
Well, today's episode was we were talking about how Crash needs more heroes on his side.
So to boil back to that, I think yes and no. Like I said earlier, my yes is because I think it always benefits to expand the universe and keep the universe growing because characters can fuck off for a couple games and they can come back for a couple games. And if they ever do a Crash comic, they can really explore the characters and stuff like that. And then the reason I would say no is because just because I like playing as Crash and by extension Coco the most, and that tends to always be true because the gameplay I'm coming to Crash for
Is Crash.
Is Crash. And like even in Titans and Mind Over Mutant, like you're doing a lot of brawling, but like the moment to moment like platforming is still like, you're Crash, it's snappy, you're moving around quick. It stayed kind of grounded in that to some extent. It's like if I'm playing a Crash platformer, I want it to be a snappy, like action packed platformer. I don't want it to be like very meticulous. I don't want to like I don't mind mini game levels or like stuff like that. And like to that end, I don't mind if like, oh, we're gonna have a shooting level and that level is Crunch and it's like Gamma, like I said earlier. But like if they add more characters, I'm fine with them in that context. It's just like I want it to be like Crash 4 where they're not like, maybe you have one level with them where it's mandatory and then like you have extra levels where you can play as them.
This
But like
might
as far as
extend the podcast a little further, but just got me thinking. Remember when it was called Wumpa League still, and they had that big shot of like the 20 so odd new characters, quote unquote
And everybody,
characters, when it was
yeah, and
Project
everybody,
Lava, when they were going to be power ups,
yeah,
and
and everybody
everyone
shat their
lost
fucking
their
pants about it.
minds. Oh,
Well,
Zootopia! What the heck?
well, I'm gonna give you a little bit of inside baseball here on that. For like, for everything I hear, and I've heard a lot more now than I heard even the last time we talked about this. But like everything I've heard, that game evolved and changed so much over the fucking 5 years it took to make that like I don't even know if that made it off the fucking concept art. But what I do know is that like the power ups and the summons and shit have always kind of been like what they are now. Where and like they've always included from everything I've heard, and I know the Jez Corden dude saw gameplay from like a long time ago, and he was already talking about like, oh, it uses like characters from the fucking Crash games, and it was like everything I ever heard was that like you would see like the Oxide shit where like you fucking summon Oxide to help you, and it was like all existing stuff, and like they did so many different concepts and shit for Wumpa League, Lava, Rumble, etc., etc., etc. Like I don't even know if any of that made it off the ground ever. Like, but if it had, like, who gives a shit? Like, because you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. People are like, they'll either complain, oh, why are all the assists and summons and relic stations these new characters, or they'll complain, oh, why is Koala Kong relegated to a relic station? Why can't he be a playable? Like, because you got to pick or choose one or the other, right? Like,
Yeah.
now, granted, that comes into the equation only if Rumble's like a runaway success and they like have years and years and years of new characters, right? Like,
Yeah.
fucking,
It's
like
like
if Koala
Fortnite.
Kong was like, but like, you kind of, it's, I would rather if they're gonna have fucking like mooks, it would just be mooks. Like, I don't want fucking like I like stuff like, oh, Oxide comes in his fucking laser car and fucking fucks everyone up for you. Like I would, that's fine to me. But like I would like if you're just gonna have like fucking like little dudes come in and do shit. Like I like that it's thematic, but if it had meant like more of those characters were going to be like actual heroes you play as, then I would obviously prefer that they fucking have like new fuckers as the summons and shit. And that's the other continuity bullet I always hit when I'm bitching about continuity and people bitching about plot holes. They're like, "Oh, where did this mutated animal come from?" I'm like, the guy with the fucking Evolvo Ray. I like there's at least two dudes who know how to make one. And then there's another dude who's a fanboy of the first two dudes who probably knows how to make his own. Like that occurred to me like the second I played Crash Tag Team Racing. People were like, "Oh, where did Pasadena and Willy Wumpa Cheeks come from?" I'm like, Von Clutch says he's a fanboy of Cortex. He probably made his own Evolvo Ray, and he made them to run his park. Hooray! Like, and even if you don't theorize it, right? Like, even if you don't go that specific with the theory, they came from an Evolvo Ray.
Yeah, like that's
Like,
but then you get people that say, "Oh, well, there was the skunk in Twinsanity that could talk and he wasn't evolved." Oh, and Polar and Purra, they could pilot
some,
vehicles.
and sometimes they stand up and wear pants, but only once. I'm like
I
I hate
never
that
really
shit on
have
it
anything to
because,
say about the skunk other than LOL, it's a game.
and that's kind of the thing, right? Like at the end of the day, it's a throwaway gag, right? Like just don't think about it too fucking much. And like if they wanted to explain it, they easily could. Oh, there's fucking radioactive shit all over the island because there is. Like it's Like the skunk got super fucking smart because it fucking got bored of walking back and forth, and like it's actually walking back and forth because its brain is poisoned by all the cortex fumes. But
Well, I think we have said everything we could say about adding new characters into the Crash Bandicoot series. Is there anything that you would like to plug in the outro to this video?
I'm going to make the last point, and it's going to be brisk. What makes new characters good or bad is the characters being good or bad. It doesn't. Them being new doesn't matter for fuck all.
Like, so if you introduce a bad character, it's a bad character.
Yeah, and even then, it's not unsalvageable. Like Embryo, in Crash 2 and Crash 1 is just he's kind of thin, especially in Crash 1. But then by Crash Mind Over Mutant, after he had fucking 12 years to get bullied by Cortex and get obsessive about it, they were able to evolve on it. Like, some character changes people don't like, and some character changes people do like. But the point is, just because a character is bad at the start doesn't mean that they're going to be bad later. Like, people like Yaya Panda a lot in Nitro Fueled, but in fucking CBNK 2 and CBNK 3D, she really didn't have much going for her.
Right.
Like, you can always fix them later. So, like, I would rather they try than not try, and them trying new characters doesn't mean that we can't see the old ones anymore. Like, fucking Crash Team Rumble spoilers, provided that the fucking layoffs don't mean that they're not going to release this content. But, like, and I'll be clear, I have no idea. Fucking Pinstripe is apparently one of the characters that they've recorded voice lines for the narrator. Like, Pinstripe was always kind of a thin character in Crash 1, but then in Crash Team Racing, they add a little bit more.
Yeah, they gave him some nice dialogue and some character, and
like, but the point is, like, he hasn't been in shit.
Right.
Let's take Nitro Fueled out of the equation, because he had to be in Nitro Fueled, and he had to be in N.Sane Trilogy because he was already in the games they're remaking.
He was in Twinsanity.
The last shit he was in was fucking 2006.
No, he was in On the Run.
But the point is, like, they can always drag these fuckers out of the nether and be like, hey, they're in this one.
Right.
It can be any of them.
Right.
Like, if they decide Entranced is going to do something, he'll do something. If they decide fucking Madame Amberly has a reason to be in the game, she'll be in the game. Like, it's literally, you can do whatever you want. It's fiction. Like, but that's the end of that point. That's the end of that point. And now we'll wrap up, and I'll plug shit. So the plugs are the same as they always are. Fucking wishlist Anton Blast on Steam. And soon you'll be able to perhaps get it on the Nintendo eShop. I have no idea when we'll have an eShop page up, but eventually we will, and you'll be able to get it on that. Can't talk about release date yet, but AntonBlast.com.
AntonBlast.com.
SummitSphere.com. Twitter.com/SummitSphere. Instagram.com/SummitSphere. TikTok.com/@SummitSphere. Fucking Tumblr.com/SummitSphere.
You don't have a Tumblr.
Yes, we do.
Oh, you for real do?
We have a Tumblr. What else?
Do you have Pinterest?
No, we don't have a Pinterest, but we do have a Blue Sky. I think we have a Threads.
You have a Threads.
But we have a Threads. I don't think we use it.
MySpace.com.
YouTube.com/SummitSphere. Twitter.com/JumpButtonCB. That's me, JB Long. That's me. I make Anton Blast and bitch about Crash Bandicoot twice a year on your channel.
We're going to be doing it once a month.
I don't know about that. We'll just have the same conversation 12 times.
Nah.
It always comes back to continuity.
No. Okay, everyone, I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and we will see you in the next one. Take care. Have a great night.